this premiere episode of a Developer Experience podcast, I talk with Maggie Fernandes, a software developer and significant contributor to the Milwaukee development community. Among other things, we discuss the tension between handwritten and digital notes, days that feel good versus days that feel bad, and the stress of mental list keeping. I admire Maggie on many levels, and I think you're going to love this episode. Cool. So why don't you go ahead and take a little bit of time to tell me about yourself?
Sure. My name is Maggie Fernandes. I am a software engineer here in Milwaukee, a career transitioner. So I've only been in the field for about a little bit over 6 years now. I work for a company called McGregor Partners. We work on supply chain software. And I'm also pretty involved in the community. I run Milwaukee's JavaScript group and Milwaukee JS, as well as a nonprofit organization called We Pivot, in which we work to create spaces for marginalized communities in tech.
And I think I met you through the community.
Correct.
At a meetup of some sort. And then we also organized a conference together for a couple of years, I think, right?
Yes.
Awesome. Can you go ahead and tell me a little bit about the systems that you use to get things done right now? What works for you and what does it look like?
Sure. So I don't have a perfect system, but I guess this is what we're talking about, right?
But who does?
It's kind of a mashup of things.
Yep.
So right now, the one key digital tool that I really love is Evernote. So that's been working pretty consistently for me. And then I'm also a big journaler. That's a word.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have a journal. I actually use what's called a passion planner, which is kind of a mix between a journal and a planner. Reason being because based on some of my community activities, I meet with people in person a lot. So you don't have that opportunity of like, let me pop open my laptop or, take notes on my phone. So having like something to just jot down notes works really well.
Mm-hmm.
But Evernote for me is great because then you have that archived searchable history, right? So it's a little bit easier. So definitely for all my work, like development work stuff, I lean hard on Evernote. But now that I'm doing a lot more project-based stuff, I've added yet another tool, which is Asana, that that I'm starting to love because it connects a little bit better to different things. So it's a little bit easier to use. So Asana, I think, might be my go-to tool for 2022. That remains to be seen. That's the hope. But yeah, my two key ones right now are definitely my Passion Planner and Evernote, and then kind of transitioning slowly into Asana.
Cool. I like that you are giving it basically a year to show whether it's worthy or not.
Absolutely.
Can you, so how do you is there any disconnect between what you're writing in paper and then what you're putting into these digital tools? Do things get lost along the way, or how do you deal with that? How do you account for that?
So that's what I try. And again, this is where the system becomes imperfect because whenever being remote actually now has been helpful because I do a lot more meetings via Zoom. So then I'm taking notes directly into Evernote as those meetings are happening, which is great. And I can, if there's a checklist, then I know I'll highlight things and I'll make leave something in as a checkbox so I know to come back and do it. When I do it in the written form, then it's a little bit harder because I have to allow for time afterwards to go back and kind of update systems and add into an actual to-do list or calendar something. So all of that is added work. And so the ultimate goal is to have a system that eliminates that kind of follow-up.
Yeah, for sure.
To the system that requires you to come back and edit things and do things. So that's where things will fall through the crack is sometimes I will write a note in here. And then as I'm flipping through 2 days later, I'm like, oh, wow, I totally forgot I wrote that down and I needed to update that or I needed to do that. So
do you have any sort of cadence that you go back and review your paper notes just in case you lost stuff?
Yeah, so I am kind of I'm also a big writing utensil kind of person. By that, I love pens. I love highlighters. I'm big into Japanese pens and stuff. So that helps a little bit because everything is color coded. So I do color code things and I do check things off. So visually, it's easy to see if I've missed something. So I'll do what I try to do is every morning allow for time first thing in the morning to kind of prep for the day by reviewing the previous day and kind of following things through to the next day as what needs to be added to the checklist. what needs to be, if I need to put something in the digital form or calendar something or send off an email, then I do that. But if anything throws that off, then that's when it becomes a problem.
How often does that get thrown off, do you think?
At least once a week, right? There's like, that morning that you barely have time to have a cup of coffee, never mind allow yourself planning time first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and then you're just sucked into everything right away.
oh yeah, then you're playing catch up all day.
Yeah, I'm definitely familiar with that experience. Do you take any time at the end of the day to do any kind of review or recap of how things went?
Yes, and that's like the days that like psychologically like I feel so amazing because
Yeah.
like at the end of the day like you feel so accomplished and you're like I've been productive and I can, even if I'm carrying things over to the next day, I feel like there's been like closure to the day.
Yep.
And so that is the goal, like at the end of the day, to always kind of go back and check things off and push, try and push things through. So in the morning I have already a good start off place. However, there are days again, which happens at least a couple of times a week, where at the end of the day, I'm so burnt out that the last thing I want to do is then add on time, like for that kind of thing. So yeah, so it sometimes it doesn't happen. It's never a perfect process, but ideally, that's the thing. At the end of the day, I feel so proud of myself when I'm like I've done said all this, but or even if I didn't do this, I have a log of it and I keep it going because I'm involved in so many different things. It also is almost a focus mechanism, being able to pull it out of your brain and put it down on something, whether it is writing it down in my planner or putting it in Evernote, because then it's accounted for. And you don't have
Right.
those moments that like you have that interruption in thought because you're in the middle of doing something else and you're like, oh, I forgot to do this, or oh, I need to write a note about this. So I try to eliminate as much of that as possible, is always kind of constantly like having things like listed and checked off. Even if it doesn't get done, as long as it's part of a list, then I feel better about it, which is probably just a mental thing, but it works for
Yeah.
me.
No, I think it definitely works for me too. I think that that's definitely a good thing to eliminate any of that, like that list keeping that you're doing in your head, and turn it into, let your brain focus on other things, like the individual thing that you're trying to do instead of trying to manage what all of the things are. That's great. So you talked about the how that if you have the start of the day and you have the end of the day and you get time in both of those to just do some planning or a review of what you did, that those are the psychologically good days. Are there any other things that make you feel throughout this process like I did a great job, like anything that affects you emotionally in a positive way when it happens?
Yeah, I love when like there's the passion planner is perfect because it's actually broken down into personal work and like game changer goals. So then there's allowed time for everything versus like it's all work, or it's also because again I try to do so many different things. It's great to be able to section it off. But then I also love when there's time to give myself feedback, which may sound a little odd, but I like if there's something that I can take a little note that says, remember next time do this, or it was great that I approached it this way. So it's kind of then goes beyond just like I checked something off my list, but then I also allow time for a learning moment or a growth moment. That also makes me feel psychologically really great and positive about the day. So I always look forward to
Cool.
that.
Yeah, I'm picturing you just like with a wall of post-its, like things that went well, like you're doing a retro for yourself. It's kind of
Exactly.
nice.
Pretty much.
Yeah. How about the opposite? What are the things that make you feel bad about how it's going or make you feel down when things don't happen as part of your system or when things do happen to your system?
That's when like I'll look at my planner and instead of like all the neatly like check boxes and everything is filled out, it's all on the other page, which is a blank page. And there's like the notes that are going like vertical, at an angle,
Yeah.
and everything's meshed together. And that like, it's just because I feel like it's a visible like representation of what's going on in my brain. And so that
Yeah.
like frightens me a little bit because it's like I'm all over the place. And so I'm always like, did I miss something? What did I miss? Like then it's like you're always waiting for that shoe to drop you because you're like, something must have been missed this day. So those are the days that aren't exactly the best. Because it's like I feel like I did nothing. Like it's just like blank pages and just randomness all over. So yeah.
So are there ways that you know of to come back from that? How do you get yourself back into a state of feeling good?
Then it's really like then I force myself to allow that planning time. And one of
Yeah.
the great things about this like physical planner, it has like a mood thing, like, so it has like little happy faces and sad faces, and so you can like circle which mood you're in. So then like for
Sure.
the next day, like I circle a happy face right away, that because I'm like, this, we're choosing our mood for today. And we're kind of like, we're gonna go ahead and set up the day as best as we can. Because if you continue in that, like it's a domino effect, right? And if you allow that to happen, then every day is going to follow the same cadence. Like, so if today was crazy and you don't stop to
Mhm.
like fix it and address it for tomorrow, then tomorrow's going to follow the same thing and it's going to be crazy. So when that happens, like I know my day is only going to be as great as I plan it to be. Because
Mhm.
there's always days that you have zero control. It'll be out of your control and it'll go crazy. But if you can have those moments that you can plan for it, or you force yourself to plan for it,
Mhm.
because I think sometimes too it's all a mental thing that, like, if I don't start working at 8 o'clock, then I'm like, I need to be at 8, and I'm like, 15 minutes is going to be okay if you take up 15 minutes, because we all know the minute you turn on your laptop,
Mhm.
it all goes like.
Yeah.
So before even turning it on, like, grab a cup of coffee, grab your planner or whatever it is that your tool is, and just focus on that. Keep all the other tabs closed and just give yourself, whether it's like a time box, 10 or 15 minutes, to just get it all planned out. Your day always ends up being so much better when you do that and
Mhm.
you allow for that time. So when things are starting to like fall off the rails, that's what I do, is I force myself to like plan that planning time.
That's awesome. Does it take you, does it sometimes take you more than a day to realize that, or are you pretty much at this point trained to recognize almost within a day that you've gone off the rails and you need to get back?
Now I think it's especially because I think it was something that, with working from home, because I didn't previously work from home, and with the pandemic having to work from home and being like, you are your office and you are your team for the most part. You really like that, being that, like, having, being in a good mental place, and that mental health is so much more important than it's ever been before.
Mhm.
So I think now I'm pretty in tune with myself, knowing that, like, okay, and beyond just kind of like, even if my apartment's a mess, like, I know that that's not a good thing, because that's gonna spiral into every other part of my life. So just making sure, like, when I see these things start to happen, like, stopping them as soon as I can, and just kind of, okay, get everything in order, because you work better. Because I'm definitely not the kind of person that works well in chaos. Like, I definitely need an organized space and an organized
Mhm.
like list, and that's where I thrive and I feel my best. Um,
Mhm.
so, and that doesn't mean like other people do exceptionally well in the other way, and that's great. But it's good to just know yourself and know like where you perform your best in, and create those spaces for yourself. So the older I get, the better I'm getting at that, at understanding like, this is what you need. You're not the fly by the seat of your pants kind of gal, and that's
Right.
okay.
Right.
So understanding that about myself. So yeah, to answer your question, absolutely. Now I can pretty quickly realize when things are starting to go off, and force myself to kind of get back on track.
That's cool. Um, that's like a level of self awareness that is super impressive. Is there throughout your life, like, was there ever a time where that wasn't the case, where like was there ever, I phrased this question in the guide that I gave you, is like, what are you running from? Like, at some point something in the past happened where you're like, oh shit, I need to get my stuff together. Is Does that play into this at all?
It does, and I think it's mainly because I've learned. I grew up with like brothers who were always like, they have like one passion, one focus,
Mm.
and I've never been that person. So a lot of times I would kind of like beat myself up a little bit about that, because I would just be like, why can't you just focus on this one thing? Why can't you just like go
Mhm.
deep on this one thing? And I could never get my brain to do that, because I was always like, oh, this is cool. I want to learn about this, or oh, let me try this. And so
Mhm.
now I think the older I've gotten, like, I take that as a strength, but understanding as well that even though it's a strength, you still have to kind of like learn how to like curtail that, and how do you put that in order and make that work.
Mhm.
Because otherwise you do end up like a goldfish, and you're always constantly distracted and like, here, 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 here. Um, so I'm like, now I'm like, it's a good thing. It's a great skill set to like, to be, have lots of passions and be interested in a lot of things. But then how do you create a system for yourself so that you
Mhm.
can manage it all and do it all to us? It'll never be done to perfection. I've also allowed room for that, to know that there's no such thing as perfection,
Mhm.
but it needs to be manageable, and it needs to be, organized, and all of that. So that's kind of what's guided me to this place of, you have to have a system. You have to color code it all, otherwise it ain't gonna work.
Mhm. Totally. What you were just talking about is actually really timely, I guess, because it's something that I've kind of been playing around with a little bit lately. Um, the I have this tendency to, like you said, like be like a goldfish and just like every 3 seconds just bounce from one thing to the next. And I've kind of been embracing it a little bit at home in terms of chores or getting stuff done around the house or whatever. Where I'm like, I know that it'd be really nice if I could focus on cleaning the bathroom right now. It'd be great if I just stayed here and I did that whole thing. But also, it's okay that like I do this one thing in the bathroom and then I walk into the kitchen because I want something there and I see something that needs to be done there and I do it. And then I walk into the living room and see something that needs to be done there. And it's okay for me to just like bounce around to all these places because I'm still being productive and doing all of these little things. Uh, and I'm kind of at a point with it where I'm like, no, I actually don't think that that's a good way. I don't think that's a good way to embrace that part of my personality because, man, it really just feels like I am pulled in a ton of different directions. So that's something that I've been thinking lately about, trying to kind of curtail that behavior and maybe like go back to what I was trying to do before, which is try to keep myself focused on one thing at a time.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge, but I think like whatever gives you that mental sense of accomplishment, and I think that's where the
Mm-hmm.
checklists come in, right? And it's just like
Yep.
time boxing things, and it's like, okay, if I get 2 done off of this list and 1 done off of that list, it's a great day.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
not thinking like I have to get 100% off of each list done, because that then you set yourself, because there's also there's the opposite of that too, of the list making, and I think we've all fallen into that when we make those like super aggressive lists, and then at the end of the day, even though you've done a lot of things, you feel bad because you didn't do all the things,
Yeah,
and then
totally.
not stopping to realize that there was no possible way that you were ever going to be able to accomplish all the things.
Yeah, for sure.
So allowing for the running list too, I think is a good thing. So now it's like there's pleasure, because usually it's like the check mark gives me pleasure, but there's
Mhm.
also pleasure in doing just like the sideline, which is just like it's continued to the next day. That's okay.
Right. It's not necessarily like you have control over it, but you've taken as much control over it as you can and said, I acknowledge that this isn't getting done today. I am going to work on it more tomorrow.
Exactly.
And that's kind of a nice little, I guess, twist on what's going on.
Yeah.
Give yourself the illusion of control, if
It's
nothing else.
perfect. That's a perfect way to put it.
Are you the kind of person who adds things after the fact just so they can check them off?
I have done that, and I'm okay with that.
There's no shame in it.
There's
I
no shame in it. I will
actually
give
think that it's
myself
a good
that.
thing. Yeah,
Exactly.
for sure. Cool. Okay. I'm going to shift a little bit to maybe talk about opportunities for improvement. Like, what are the things that you feel like you still need to figure out yet? And maybe what are some things that you've tried that didn't work, that you want to try again or try in a different way?
Yeah, I think so for me, things that I want to try is because a lot of the work that I do, especially outside of work, is pretty project based, and sometimes I tend to hone in on like what's right in front of me, and you need to be able to see the bigger picture.
Mhm.
So, which is why like I'm excited with Asana, because it's a tool that doesn't just allow me to write down the tasks of the to-dos that need to happen like within this week or within, the next couple of days kind of thing, but it allows me to do like a big picture scope of what needs to get done and then chunk those out into smaller pieces.
Mhm.
And even if I have to assign them to new team members, I can do that. I can pull in like, documents and save all of that. So that's why I'm excited for that, even though hopefully it doesn't become a huge thing and start to defeat the purpose of it all.
Right.
But I want to be able to do that, because sometimes too, it's kind of like Evernote's great because it's like I keep notes of ongoing, like I have all the history, and it's a great way of like doing the notebooks and the notes in each of the notebooks. So it's very journally kind of, which is why it works really well with my brain. And then it keeps that whole sequence, and so I love that part of it, but I think I need more of a project management kind of roadmappy kind of tool,
Mhm.
to help with the other aspect of what I want to do, because there's so many like program development things that I would like to do or that I'm working on, that a tool like that works a little bit better for, um, beyond managing just a day-to-day accomplishment.
Mhm. Are there any other difficulties with that shift, like that shift of going from the more fine grained individual level of control items that you can do versus this bigger picture, um, project level, as you described it, where you're thinking more about like strategy and all those kinds of things? Any other things worth mentioning that make it difficult?
I think for that, like sometimes like the maintainability of that too can become difficult, because I remember before I used to use, oh, what was the tool? With the same kind of like boards and stuff. The name will come to me. Trello.
Yeah.
Yes, I was a big fan of Trello because I can create as many boards as many things, and sometimes like the more you can create, the you become your worst enemy, right? Because then you overthink things and you add so many things to it. And if you're not on top of it and maintaining and keeping it up to date constantly, then it becomes like outdated so quickly, then it's no longer useful.
Definitely.
So that's why I stopped using Trello, because it was like, okay, yeah, that didn't work out for me. But I'm hoping with Asana, my goals, it'll
New
work
year,
out a
new
little.
you.
Exactly, new year, new me. Hoping that will work out a little bit better. But yeah, so I think that is definitely the danger of using a tool like that, is if you're not maintaining it consistently, then it can get too big and too out of control, and then it's no longer useful.
Yeah, it's not, you just can't even get your head into something that you haven't looked at for a while.
Exactly.
You just throw it away and start over.
Yep.
I also used to be a Trello user. I also have a Trello account with like 40 different boards on it that I haven't looked at in a really, really long time. I don't know. It's sometimes like it works for you, and then when it stops working for you, it just falls apart really, really quickly, which is, I guess, kind of why I wanted to talk about all this stuff. Like, I'm not feeling at this point like my system is falling apart, but it's also kind of nice to, at the very least, have this meta conversation and get more aware of what's working for me and why it's working for me. So yeah, I guess maybe on that note, like, do you have any thoughts about like that meta side of it? Like, why does this stuff work for you and why doesn't it?
I think like for me, some of the like, especially definitely the passion planner works for me because of the fact I think it's very psychological. It's just kind of like, even just like I said, even just getting it out of my brain and putting it down on paper is a sense of accomplishment. Even if I didn't check a single thing off the list, then I feel like I have more control over my life. Versus like when different things that I've used, like either the Trello, or I even used to have the Post-it note thing of like a zillion and one Post-it notes, and that just felt like everything was out of control, even though it was a color coded out of control, but it was all out of control.
There was still pieces of paper all falling on the floor.
Exactly. And you're like, oh, yeah. There was a Post-it in there. But this is just like having this like little black book that closes up, and it has a different color tabs for the different months. And it's like, oh, that all feels so great to me. And the fact that even within the day, everything is broken up by like, what is a work task? What is, a community task? What is a personal task? All of that like feels like life is under control. You've got it all planned out. You haven't done anything, but you've got it all planned out.
Right. You know exactly how your inaction is going to lead to the inevitable doom.
Absolutely.
I guess there is a lot to that, of just having that awareness and knowing, being able to maybe like see how things are going before they happen.
Exactly. Definitely.
I mean, honestly, that is great. Like to have a day where you can start your day and you can say ahead of time, I know that today is going to be a mess, and I know that I'm going to basically have no time to do the things that I want to do. It makes it a lot easier to handle than if you were to start that day with, it's just another day. And then at the end of the day, you feel like crap because you haven't done anything that you wanted to do.
Yeah. And sometimes what I'll do, and I've done this in the past, is I'll start a day in which I will write down all these tasks. And to your point, I know that I'm only going to probably be able to do 2. And so like before the day even starts, like I will like kind of do that continuity, like check it off in the sense of like, it's going to get done tomorrow. And even that makes me feel better because it alleviates some of the pressure.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm like, I've got 20 things I need to do, but I'm only going to do 2. The rest is going to have to wait until tomorrow. And that's okay. And so that's like, it's a planned, like, putting it off, which is okay. It's still under control. So I feel better about myself. And that sometimes too is like kind of alleviating some of that pressure is a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Giving yourself the freedom to be imperfect.
Yeah.
It's kind of nice.
Absolutely.
Cool. the last couple of questions that I have for you are, do you have any examples or stories of times when this kind of system has really failed you or really helped you, that come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, definitely like when I first started my journaling, like I've always wanted a notebook, and there were systems that I've created. Like even as I look right to my side here, I have all these little mini journals that I used to use because there was one time that I was like, I'll have a notebook for everything. How perfect. And so now I just have a bunch of notebooks. Like, when am I ever going to get a chance to like go through and read through them? So at the time though, it felt like such a great system because everything was labeled and it was like great.
Yeah.
And they were all like black notebooks, which to me, like that simplicity of it all felt great. And I had a place to put a note depending on what project I was working on. So that felt great. But then at the end of the day, it was like, no, this is definitely not working. So it was a system that started off like with great excitement and like felt really positive about, and then like halfway through, I was like, yeah, this isn't working.
It's kind of overwhelming. There's a lot of
Yeah.
friction there to like basically make a note. You have to figure out which book to put it in.
Exactly.
And then you have to find it in a pile.
Exactly.
That's fun.
Yeah. But I think it's also like being the other part too is there's a struggle between being digital and being like kind of like that more physical note taking, because sometimes I will take a note and then I'll talk to one of like my partners and I'll be like, oh, I should send you. And then I'm like, oh, I wrote that down. It's not like something that I can like copy paste and send you. So that too is kind of a constant, like I've even went down that whole black hole of watching the YouTube, like note takers, like they do the digital note taking on the iPads and all of that stuff. And I was like, maybe this is the next thing for me. And I'm like, that's a very expensive next thing. So let's hold off before we go down that section.
Do some smaller experiments first.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you think that there is a time where you won't be writing things down on paper, or do you think that that's always going to be part of it?
I think that's always going to be part of it because ever since I was a little kid, I've always been a person that loves a great highlighter, loves a great pen, loves a beautiful notebook, loves a pencil case. So I think I would have a hard time letting go of that. I think it may be that maybe that transitions to more like journals for my reading and in a different space in my life versus like my workspace. But I think I'll always be somebody that'll have to write things down. And I think it's also how my brain, in order to slow it down, sometimes the process of writing it down helps me comprehend it a little bit better, which is kind of odd for somebody who's a developer to say, but that's just how my brain works.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I feel like that's an experience I remember from college, especially, was taking notes on paper was way better than anything else. Like that actually made things stick in my head.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Cool. Are there any things that we haven't talked about in regards to this that you think we should talk about?
No, I mean, I love this idea because like, even for me, like this whole passion planner was actually something I hadn't heard of. And I have a group of female developers that like we are on Slack together and we kind of share all kinds of things. And we have a journaling channel, and it was like the beginning of last year and everybody was like, what's everybody going to do for this year? Like journal, and everybody kind of shared like their systems. And that's how I learned about the passion planner, and I've loved it and I've shared it with other people. So I think it's always great to kind of be open to improving your system and listening to what's out there, which is why I'm excited to hear more of these episodes, because I want to learn new things, and there might be a tool out there that could be a great combination of everything that I'm doing that I'm not aware of. So yeah, but I think regardless of what your tool is, for me, what I found the most important thing that definitely is just helpful is to just make time for the planning.
Yeah.
Regardless of how you're doing it and what you're using, just the making the time for it, I think, is what really helps. Is just instead of jumping into your day, like you have to give yourself that mental space to just like breathe and plan for the day.
Yeah. And we talked about how you make time at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. Do you also make time at a, I guess, less frequent cadence to kind of review the system and like look for opportunities to improve it, look for ways to make things more efficient or remove friction from anything?
Not consistently, but one of the great things about the Passion Planner is that mid-year, it actually has an exercise for you to go through and see like, how's the year going? Like what's been working, what hasn't been working. So that I've loved about it, that it actually puts that in there for me. So if I haven't made time, I like, once I'm flipping through and I'm like, oh, it's that time of year.
Oh, I should do that.
I should do this.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that I don't know. For me, I know that there's a threshold somewhere, and I don't know what it is. Where I'm like, when I'm doing something, if it takes too much effort, or it takes too much time, or it doesn't give me enough satisfaction, or whatever, I'm just like, okay, I'm not going to do this, or I'm going to keep doing this the bad way, and I know that I can keep doing it the bad way, and it'll be fine. It's just like a little extra. It's a few extra seconds or whatever. But I'm just very curious how people think about like, where is that threshold where you sit down and you're like, okay, I need to refactor this part of this system because it's not working, or just like kick the can down the road. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I mean, for me, when I get frustrated when it's adding to my workload is when then I'm like, okay, this I gotta look at this or figure out a better way of doing this or find a new system. Like
Mm-hmm.
part of I think why some of the things that I do work well is because I actually enjoy doing it. Like every time I pull up like an Evernote, there's this like little part of me that gets excited about creating a new like note. And I'm like, I know it's odd, but that's just how I work.
They have tuned that tool very, very well.
Yes. And I'm like, I get excited about my new checklist. And the fact that now when I check it, it actually crosses it off too. That's fantastic. Like all these little things, mental things that are like, that
Yeah.
works for me. So there's excitement there. But whenever there's other things that I'm doing that are part of my system that becomes like, oh, a chore. Now I have to go and like update this or not. Then I'm like, okay, obviously this is not working. Or if
Yeah.
it's like the end of the week and I'm like, oh, I haven't touched this like all week long and I really need to update it. That's when I start to think there's got to be an easier way. There's got to be a better way of doing this. So that's
Yeah.
usually kind of like my mental thing because I'm definitely the kind of person that like does, as I think most of us are, like will do the thing that we enjoy doing, and that's the stuff that we'll do most frequently, and we'll, and so that's how I weigh it out. I'm like, if I'm doing it all the time and really enjoying and looking forward to it, then that's working. If not, then time to move on and get rid of it.
That was everything that I wanted to talk about. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up?
No, thank you for this. This was fun.
Big thanks to Maggie Fernandes for this conversation. You can find her on Twitter at Maggie Codes. I'm Steve Hicks. You can find me on Twitter at ppopowitz, that's PEPOPOWITZ. As for the show, we are a DevX podcast on Twitter. Support us at our home at anchor.fm/a-developer-experience. And please like and review us wherever you found us. Take care, friends.
We're choosing our mood for today. And we're kind of like, we're going to go ahead and set up the day as best as we can.
I know that today is going to be a mess.